So my first question is, did you find procurement or did procurement find you?
I would say it was a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
My first software-centric job was working at a company called Get There.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first online corporate booking tool, and I intentionally discovered that opportunity and was able to find employment there. And through luck and intention after that, all of the ancillary procurement-like verticals
Yeah.
kind of came my way. So
Yeah.
travel followed by expense management, then ultimately procurement and everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just over the course of time and over the course of the career, all of those verticals and procurement, broadly speaking, just kind of came together.
Interesting. It probably ages me a little bit for how long I've been in procurement, but travel was one of my first categories. And it was just at the very beginning of transitioning from the agency model and spending 30 to 40 bucks every time someone picked the phone up to, using online booking. And that was a heck of a transition. People resisted it, to no end until finally they found out how much easier it was.
Oh, big time. Isn't it interesting how that theme just currently repeats itself?
I know, and ironically, that's what we want to talk about today is usability. And when we think of it from the time that you've really been in this space, what have you seen change about the procurement experience over that last kind of 10 years or so?
I think that is the key word, is change. I've been in the industry, in the technology space for quite a while at this point, and just when you think you've figured things out and things settle,
Mhm.
things change. And maybe the example I would cite is even speaking about my experience here at Coupa. I've been here for over 8 years now, which is quite a
Yeah.
long time to be at one spot. But when I first started, the big play around the industry was, hey, you can get it all in one suite
Yeah.
of applications.
Yeah.
In terms of all the integrations, everything available in one space, don't have to manage vendors, all that good stuff. And that seemed to be a very logical concept. But then as technology quickly evolved and integrations and middleware became widely available and very, very good, all of a sudden you can see the ability of customers to build and choose point solutions and
Yeah.
connect them all together, because again, the integration tech is so great. And then we kind of moved into this early stage of machine learning and AI, where having the data was kind of the big thing.
Yeah.
So back to one suite. You have one
Yeah.
suite. We have a consolidated data repository. You can leverage that for the future, so to speak. But now, Anthropic made some big noise with the Model Context Protocol, which gives LLMs and external systems access to this new MCP interface to get context and tool access across the ecosystem again. So we keep going back and forth between that singular platform to the point solution and back and forth and back and forth.
Can you talk a little bit about what MCP is? You just referred to it then, and it's one of those things I've seen mentioned, a lot over the past month or two, probably, without necessarily knowing on layman's terms what it is. So if you could kind of give the high level, this is what MCP is, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, sure. And I'm, along with, I'm sure all the listeners to this podcast, are on the journey of learning more about all these technologies that are just advancing and changing literally every day. So as probably most of us are aware, applications can integrate with other applications through API.
Yeah.
It requires, it's pretty straightforward. There's OAuth and OIDC clients that you can set up to create those authentication capabilities that allow that integration to happen securely with the right roles and permissions, of course. But as the ecosystem just explodes with all these applications, like building and managing all of these on your own, becomes a incredibly difficult exercise. Even within the Coupa ecosystem, we have so many applications within our infrastructure, within our environment. Building connectivity to each one of those individually takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And also utilizes AI tokens to manage context and all that good stuff. So what Anthropic has created was this model context protocol, which is essentially a singular interface that manages that abstraction between what an LLM or an external agent needs to interface with to get the context of the applications, let's say applications behind it.
Yeah.
So it's a new standard that by orders of magnitude make the integrations of LLMs and external systems to applications around the enterprise ecosystem so much easier.
It's such an interesting kind of evolution of, even when we as a team are building things internally from an agentic perspective, you're still grabbing APIs and there's workflows and all the things that kind of go into building that. And, you look forward and think it's probably a year or two, maybe it's faster than that, given the pace of change, where even that process itself will feel like it's outdated. And there will be much easier ways to connect all these things together.
Oh, absolutely. You can already leverage AI to build MCP servers, for example. So yeah, like I said, the industry is advancing so quickly. It's just got to hitch onto that ride and hold on.
It's exciting. It's exciting for all of us that have been in the industry for so long. But how does that change impact the user experience? And how we think about how users, whether it's procurement professionals or even the users of procurement technology, what the experiences that they get from this.
Yeah, I think it's going to have massive impacts on the user experience. I think given how quickly the industry is changing and given how we've historically managed our roadmap, we're trying to adjust as well. But I think what's starting to happen as these LLMs and related tools are becoming more and more central to the flow of work of any type of knowledge worker, it's going to be essential that applications like Coupa or any application anywhere starts to fit and meet the user where they are. So historically, if they were in Slack or Teams, you wanted your application to be available there and the collaboration to be available in that interface. But now, as more companies are deploying ChatGPT to their employee base, or Claude or Grok or whatever it may be, as that becomes more central to the flow of work, we as enterprise software providers need to be cognizant of that being a new user experience, a new user interface that we need to be aware of and optimize around as being a new funnel of activity, which very likely could be the start of the Coupa experience.
Yeah.
And then there'll be a logical handoff when, say, a prompt-based interface can no longer support the interaction between the user and the LLM, then it's a logical handoff between that and the application. So for us, it's a balance because we're building our own internal agents. We have a Navi AI agent that we've been working on for quite a while, and we have a robust roadmap planned around that. But generally speaking, that agency is going to be within the application. So we want to continue to be open so that everything I just described can be facilitated, where we want to be where the worker is, wherever they are. And then whenever that handoff happens, we also want to be there too.
So the interface could be, and just using Coupa as an example, the interface can be a Coupa interface intake, let's say, for whatever the process is, or it could be in some workspace tool that's already been used, and you cited as an example Slack. But anyone where that's where an initiative is started, and that just connects in with the the technology of the application kind of layer, bypassing that the Coupa interface as an example, but you're using kind of the Coupa application behind it.
That's exactly right. I think that's where we're all going.
Well, I mean, once it's fascinating. Two, it kind of, as a procurement person, it brings you out in a little bit of a cold sweat, thinking I can't necessarily control the process, because that's what we're used to. And perhaps that comes down to, and perhaps that approach is one of the reasons why we have usability and experience issues, because we've tried to push a one-size-fits-all on, you know, every user in the community versus it being a lot more fit for their individual workflows and the way that they operate, the way that they work on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And I think it's important for the technology and systems, enterprise systems like us and everything else out there to be malleable, to give customers choice. You know, we've got customers within our ecosystem that are so aggressively pushing the boundaries around how they want their employees to be optimized and prepared for the future. And then we have other employees that are similarly motivated, but they're building wrappers around LLMs, and that's how they're basically biasing and influencing, creating control and structure and, I guess, predictability around what they're deploying. So yeah, it's flexibility, openness, I think, is going to be more important than ever before.
Do you think they will end up becoming best practice, or are we truly going to? Because a lot of times when you think about building to a so-called best practice, that's not necessarily your best practice. It's just what tends to have worked for industry, but it's not personalized for the organization that's within it. Do you see that there will be best practices form around this, or it will truly be what's the culture, you know, within each one of the organizations and what best enables the people within that organization based on what's unique to them?
Yes. Yeah. I think there's an evolution, I think, that's happening, and there's somewhat of an intersection with where the future is quickly going and like how do you manage best practice, structure, and predictability. And it's one of the reasons why we think our investment in orchestration is so important, because in the beginning, I think, given we are still on the early part of that hockey stick, so to speak. And so while we do have customers that are pushing the boundaries around how aggressively they want to push AI capabilities to their employees, there's an equal number of users who want that best practice predictability. So I think the way that can be accomplished is by deploying workflow and orchestration that are governed by rules and conditionality to route, say, a request from A to B. And I think if you use that as the foundation of the experience, the end user doesn't know about the structure underneath the covers, but the process that they've initiated that they're engaging with is directly linked to that. And so whether the interface is a UI, whether it's a chat interface, that foundation of structure, best practice is serving them up.
Yeah.
And I think over time, whether it's the next year, couple years, months, gosh, everything again is moving so fast. Customers and their buying departments, they'll become more and more comfortable with what AI is able to do. And so that structure around that workflow, that's the foundation. I think the best practices that are rigorously attached to that for the moment, where, for example, someone submits a request, if it's over $10,000 or below $10,000, that'll determine what path happens next in a very intentional way. I think best practices will evolve to accommodate more flexibility, more dynamicism based on, you know, the history of the company, their transaction history. They'll become more comfortable over time. I think maybe one thing that really made this very tangible for me is we recently had a workshop with a customer, and we were talking about intake and orchestration and all the benefits of it. And they were all on board with the concept of it, but they were already anticipating that the permutations of which a request can take within their massively global organization would be so substantial
Mhm.
that they couldn't imagine like configuring by hand.
The build of that is
The build of
is
it,
is too overwhelming. The thought of it is too overwhelming.
and by the time they get halfway building, it's time to update the policies and the configurations on the stuff they configured in the first place. So for certain companies, they want to lock that in, but then certain companies are like, we see a very near future where we have to have a more accommodating future look approach to how best practices have been historically done in the past, like from a manual to where we are now. It's just
And I imagine there could be some learning, like the application would learn over time what to apply where, you know, with a high enough degree of confidence or certainty that, you know, mitigates any risk, so that it's AI driven versus you having to manually configure those workflows or those, you know, if then statements for, you know, 100,000 different things that you might buy.
Yeah, exactly. And there are ways to minimize the risk. You can have, you know, approvers and oversight brought in during particular steps of that process. You can engage with agents and external endpoints to, you know, check on risk levels of things. So yeah, there are ways to control the risk as things kind of transition towards this hardcore, have to be in a particular way, completely predictable, which is mostly where we are right now, to a future where in time everyone will be more comfortable with the system learning and figuring out things as we go along.
And I think you've done some pretty in-depth work and studies on usability, you know, looking both at power users, but also more infrequent system users. I wonder if you could share just a little bit about some of your learnings from the research that you've done.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for us was, and it's so obvious, around how much attention and care you have to place on each of the personas. I think that over the past 18 months, we really truly personified the types of people using our product. Whereas I would say in the past, we have had such a strong bias around addressing the needs of the professional type user. You know, it's kind of no regrets about that. It's led to our ability to lead the market in so many ways, but there is such an unmet need around the buyer, around this infrequent requester. I think we somewhat hit a tipping point where, for better or for worse, procurement has become a pretty complicated practice. There's so many options and choices and optimizations around the program with concepts that are just so alien to the typical user. So I think we hit a tipping point where it was basically, you know, enough is enough. It's like maybe an infrequent user could grok some of this stuff up to a point, but now it's like, what? Do you want me to onboard a supplier or understand what a blanket PO is? It's just too much. So I think for us, it was just a wonderful exercise to really diverge those persona concepts and get really precise around the needs of both of them. But at the same time, what was equally fascinating is around like both the clear differences around what they expect and the clear overlaps around what they both need. So it was just a constant back and forth of, hey, we're going to manage these two personas, but then be flexible enough in our thinking and our design practice to understand that one persona may be here for one thing, one persona may be here for one thing, but they're completely overlap for another.
Yeah. Do you find that that usability is the leading influence on adoption? You know, when you think about the adoption of tools that we start to put in place, or you know, is that one of many things? You know, all of equal importance? Because at least from my experience, I think that especially as a sporadic user, you know, even in procurement, you can be a sporadic user. You're not necessarily a power user, even if you're in the procurement department. And the difficulty of remembering how to use a tool was such a blocker on, you know, my motivation to use a tool or to circumvent the process. Which my previous bosses probably wouldn't like me to say, and I didn't say that to them at the time. But that's you know the reality of how you figure out. Do you try and go around the process, or do you try and follow the process?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the worst possible outcome is, you know, they can't figure things out and they end up expensing it, and it's the spend under management is completely out the window. But yeah, the user experience, I think there's a lot of interesting parts of that life cycle. It's for us, we literally called our product Smart Intake and Orchestration because we see two halves of that puzzle, if you will, where the beauty of a well-designed inbound system is that it takes away that cognitive overhead, the need for you to read a manual to understand when to do this versus that. And I think to add on to your point, we've had very recent discussions with customers where, hey, we understand that you've got these two personas, and we literally have two licenses to manage those personas. And we got some interesting feedback from a customer saying, hey, we like the new experience. We really like it, but we think that our professional users would benefit it too. Like John not only has to manage the procurement program, but he needs a headset. He needs to buy office supplies for his department or his home office. And it should be just as easy for him to do that. Even though he knows the program, they'll benefit from that speed and ease of use. I think the part that was, in retrospect, obvious, you know, hindsight 2020, as part of that experience, I think we got the feedback from the user where, you know, originally it's, you know, make the front end really easy. They submit it, set it, forget it, and just they'll get the thing in time. What is now obvious is that even if you're an infrequent user, a casual user, and you've submitted something, you actually want to know all the different stages that request is going through in the process of getting fulfilled. So even though you might not have an understanding of the contract process or a supplier being onboarded or a risk event being applied, seeing it as part of the delivery of what you ordered gives you a better sense and understanding and truly a deeper appreciation of what the procurement function is. And so we thought, oh, let's just keep it simple, you know, black box, your thing will be ready, it's being approved. But then having visibility through all of that has been kind of a game changer for us.
It's interesting how we, you know, procurement has often been accused of being a black box, not just in our, you know, in kind of the rec to PO to contracting and all that kind of process, the procure to pay process, but in everything we do from a sourcing perspective, from a category management perspective. You know, when you were talking there, I think about when you're having a parcel, when you buy something on Amazon, you're having something delivered. You know, I want to keep going back to see, has it left that warehouse yet? Or has it gone to, you know, which shipping part is it in? And it's not just I'm sat here waiting for it to show up at the front door. And there's I think something to be said for behavioral kind of psychology in what your expectation is when you can suddenly see the complexity of that something goes through, as opposed to just waiting for something and wondering why it's not happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a casual user, seeing that orchestration, so to speak, it kind of ties things up nicely in that, you know, as we talked about, you want to eliminate the cognitive overhead, and you don't want them to know and have to be responsible for connecting all those dots, but presenting all of those in a sequence and helping them understand, like, that in itself teaches the policy
Yeah.
and best practices, just understanding the motion of things that need to happen in order to fulfill and get you what you need.
I think it's also it changes the perception of procurement. You know, I talk a lot about the perception of procurement and our desire to be as strategic as we can and working on the most impactful, you know, areas of spend for the business. We're often hamstrung a little bit because by how difficult we make it to order the most basic of things. And so that's what most users within the organization's experience of procurement is buying the easy stuff they need infrequently. And so if that's not necessarily the most optimum process for them, then they look at procurement as being, oh, it's that black box we talked of, and they don't know what's going on. They look at procurement as, if I can't necessarily trust them to help me get my headset, how am I going to trust them to work on these really strategic things? Or there's the noise gets into the system where the execs are talking to each other, you know, in the car, and it's like, did you hear about the problems I had with procurement trying to order this thing? So the easier we make it for them, I think the greater help it is for procurement in terms of trying to have even more impact upstream of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those ripple effects are real. There's no doubt about it.
How do you think about optimizing for the you know, infrequent sporadic user, like what their experience looks like and what their interaction with the platforms are?
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal is when they start interacting with the system, you know that you have their attention for a shorter period of time. And the goal would be, in that short period of time, navigate them to where they are and gather the information from that in one fell swoop. So it's somewhat of a get them what they need, get them out, and have that whole exercise just initiate that asynchronous orchestration. It goes back to, you know, we look at smart intake and orchestration as two pieces of a whole that work together. But once that handoff completes, and literally we're hoping that the requester completes their submission in a couple minutes or less, hopefully faster. And then all I have to do is sit back and just keep tabs on the thing that requested. If there is communications that have to be conducted, you know, that'll happen. But by and large, their responsibility ends. And the idea is that when we have their attention, we ask the right questions, we have them submit the right information, so that based on how the workflow is architected, the systems downstream that require that data to function, we have it all one fell swoop. And I think it also goes back to what we talked about earlier in terms of meeting the user where they are. It's how do we combine this structure and intention in such a way that when they need something, it's not such an abrupt context switch and disrupt in their flow. So if they're comfortable in a particular chat-based application or in the future an LLM, we want to be there as well. So all these concepts are merging. We're highly aware of the explosion of apps that continues to happen, and our goal is just to make things as simple, and by being as open as possible, I think we can be there.
No, I think about when you think about the procurement operating model, the way that changes, and this is something we talk about a lot, we went from kind of this decentralized state to centralized, which is all around spend under management and almost kind of spend and control. And then we kind of moved to center-led, which is recognizing there was probably too much control placed on some things. We want to devolve some responsibility back into the business. What we're really now being able to do is completely kind of turn it around into decentralized, but decentralized in a way that you talked earlier about. There's still rule-based systems, but those are more what's the right word? Invisible to the users, the sporadic users. They don't necessarily see that control. They just see the experience on the front end of how they buy something. So we were kind of pushing or enabling that responsibility back into the business, so procurement isn't seen as being the roadblock for it. while providing a better experience and less resources needed on the procurement side to actually manage some of these processes.
Yeah, totally. And to that point, those practices that you mentioned where things were centralized, in essence, that person who was in that central organization, they were the intake
Right. Yes.
engine. They were the orchestration.
If they had the relationships with people to reach out to them in the first place, which was often a huge big problem or a challenge for us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you need to have the relationship and the connectivity. And once you establish that, then you're like literally doing the intake and the back and forth, and the human is the orchestration. So yeah, we're well on our way to replacing that. And yeah, who knows what the technology will bring. I don't even want to say 2 to 3 years from now. We're talking.
Things move so quickly, right? That's our old framework reference for change.
Yeah, we're talking like months. What's the next month going to bring in the industry? It's amazing.
I know it's about time to wrap, so I want to thank you so much, Jason, for joining me. The last question is always the easy one, I say, and that's if listeners would like to reach out, connect, learn a little bit more about what you're working on, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, the best place is LinkedIn. Yeah. I'm happy to connect and have conversations, answer any questions. I love this dialogue. The industry is going in such a amazing, interesting place. So yeah, let's just continue the conversation.
All right. Well, we'll include a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes for today's episode. So those will be artofprocurement.com/podcast. That's artofprocurement.com/podcast. And Jason, one last time, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.